Actually, you know what? One of the best things that I've heard from you is, I've got to say this correctly now, is emotion is energy. Oh, I've said it wrong now.
You said it wrong.
I've said it so many times.
No, that should be outtake.
I've said it so many times.
Don't worry, that's definitely staying in. So, Kurz, come on. It's season 2 now, so let's kick it off.
Emotion, energy in action.
In motion.
Yes. And energy in motion.
There we go. Yeah.
One of the best things.
He's only said it like 20 times before you arrived. And that's the funniest thing as well.
I know, I got panicked and I got it wrong then. But it stuck with me so much because it's so true.
It's so true. I mean, if you think back to one of Maya Angelou's most popular quotes, it goes, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget the way you made them feel.
Yeah.
And that's all emotion.
Yeah.
It's energy, emotion. It's the way we feel. We can't explain it, but we can feel it inside of ourselves.
This is why I'm so excited for this record today, because we usually go into a podcast and it's usually quite, sometimes for me, quite statistical of like, okay, we bought a amount of cars or we sell something or like in my head, that's how my brain focuses. I'm very, very orderly and very OCD in that aspect. But with this podcast, Kurz, I know you want to do introductions, wrote down here, so I'll let you do the introduction. But for me, this is more so about each thing that you say or that somebody can take their own opinion, their own approach from it. It's everything so personable, even though the sentence is the same. It means something to so many different people. And even the same person, if it's said today or next year, because your life changes. Yeah. And the same book, Energize, can be so important to you at so many different stages of life.
It's a book
and that's
thing.
something that I find really fascinating, because I'm somebody that's like, okay, 1 + 1 is 2. But in this aspect, it's not. It can be 3, 4, 5, and that can change from morning to afternoon. And that's what I'm excited about.
Well, the guest
I've got lots of questions.
So I'll jump straight into it. The guest that we have got on today is Simon Alexander. He's a life coach, keynote speaker from Sky News, BBC, Forbes, and the best-selling author of Energize. And Energize, actually, Alex, explain Energize for us. No, Simon. Why did I say Alex then? I'll tell you what, today is not a good day for me.
Kurt's so excited, he can't remember anything.
Simon, explain Energize to
yes,
us.
Energize, distilled into one sentence, talks about how energy management, not time management, is the key to productivity.
Yes, and I love it, and I couldn't say that anymore. I was actually doing some research, and I found one thing which I didn't realize, but a heart is so important because it creates such a big electromagnetic field that actually jumps out of our body 4 to 5 feet. So if you're sat next to somebody and you're like, oh, I've got this good feeling about them, or a positive feeling, or some good energy, it genuinely is because you've lined up your heart, you've lined up your mind, your soul, and your body all together. And this is what Energize is all about.
And people can feel it. You know, if you look at popular culture, we talk about it so often. It's the Star Wars film franchise, they call it the Force. In yoga, if you practice yoga a lot, you might refer to it as prana. In my Chinese culture, we call it chi. Maori culture, they call it mana. In the streets, they call it vibes. You know, I like his vibes, right? It's referring to energy. But yet we don't address it in ourselves. You know, we talk about it a lot, but we don't actually put things into practice to address our own energy. But when we do, it becomes infectious. We start to attract things into our life effortlessly.
I absolutely agree.
People
with that.
forget that like our body fires, and it is actually like electric signals that's telling my arm to move and my thought process. And I think we kind of sometimes think our organs and our body is kind of like, okay, we use it, but we forget how amazing our bodies are, the way they heal. But also, like for me, mind over matter, the brain is so interesting, so untapped in the aspect of what you can do. And I think the one thing, the quotes that you say, it kind of really allows you to kind of open your brain and be like, okay, how can I take that information in and really use it to better yourself? And that's one thing that each quote, like people take it in so many different ways. How's that for you as somebody who's written, say, a sentence, and you know that it means so many different things for so many people? Is that a thought process when you're actually putting pen to paper or typing it out?
It may play into it, but a lot of what I share is from personal experience. And they just say people can interpret it in different ways, but that's also the beauty of the messages I share. the reason it's interpreted in different ways is because we're going through different challenges. We may have different constraints, different lifestyles, obligations. And so what we take from it might be very different at that moment. But as you said earlier, when you come back to in the future, you might take a different meaning again.
Yeah.
And this is why I love rereading classics and rereading books again and again and again that have had an impact on me. Because when I read it the first time, certain pages or chapters will speak to me. I'll read it again, maybe a different chapter speaks to me at this time. Because we're constantly evolving as humans. If you're focused on being better than who you were yesterday, of course you're going to evolve. And your life will change. And of course, different priorities come into your life. You start to eliminate things, let go of some other stuff. And for me, it's beautiful to see what sort of impact these things have. There was a great study done in the US about the factors that contributed to certain sports teams outperforming others.
Oh, I love this.
So I don't know if you've come across this study. So they looked
I haven't. Go into this. I like this. It sounds good.
So they looked at the NBA league.
Yeah.
And they wanted to see were there certain traits of the best performing teams that made them consistently outperform the rest. So they looked at a lot of factors. They watched video replays of matches. They looked at how team members interact with each other. And what they discovered was that the teams that had the greatest number of physical contact with each other, so fist bumps, high fives, hugs.
Are outside.
Exactly. What happened is they outperformed the average team. And it wasn't because they were hard work. I mean, you have to be hardworking to make the team in the NBA. You have to have a height advantage to play well in basketball. But it came down to physical touches between them. And so what they then found
is that just connect them to each other better?
It's the connection, but it's also the fact that each recipient of a physical touch interprets it differently.
Yeah.
So let's say you've been substituted and I come on and we high five each other.
Yeah.
Even though no words are exchanged, that high five to you might say, great job, Curtis.
Yeah.
I'm going to come on and take over from you. I might high five someone else. To them, it might mean something different. It's like, don't worry, chin up, we've got this. Yeah. So the way we interpret that action is different. But just that physical touch has a positive effect.
But you know, the different ways that we...
It's so important because it makes sense.
It does, but the different ways that we interpret these actions, it all comes down to actually how we feel in ourselves, doesn't it? It all comes back to this, because if we're not feeling good in ourselves and we're not fully secure in ourselves and we're doing the techniques and the things that we love to do, that high five doesn't become a positive high five, does it? So you really have to align yourself in all of these positions.
Absolutely.
When was the changing factor for you? What made you go into this? Like, why energy? Where did you find this is the key substance to life? And it is the key substance to life.
Yeah. So first of all, and I'll come to that, the fact is you cannot have self-development without self-awareness.
Yes.
You have to have a level of awareness about yourself, where you are and what must change. And this is why, we talk about the head and the heart. The longest journey we make are the inches from our heads to our heart. As I say to the people I work with, never an easy journey, but the most important and fulfilling that you will ever embark on. And so for me, the moment my journey started changing was as a result of the financial crisis.
Yeah.
So I graduated from the London School of Economics. I started my career in banking at the worst possible time, the middle of 2007, a year before the financial crisis. And just to make things a little interesting, it was with a company called Lehman Brothers, which collapsed into administration.
I do have this person. Did you take anything? Did you take any memorabilia? It's probably worth something.
Yeah, I know. I think I've got a green baseball cap and a mug. Nothing too fancy, but the cheap memorabilia.
Yeah.
And I was in and out of jobs for nearly 10 years in the financial industry. And I couldn't keep a job down for longer than a couple of years. Not very nice at the time, very challenging to go through redundancy and massive change in your industry. But in hindsight, I jokingly tell myself that it was probably the universe telling me, Simon, you're not meant to be employed. You got to look outside of this industry.
Yeah.
But it was the crisis that got me asking myself deeper questions.
That was your catalyst. That was like, well,
it was one of the first catalysts. Yeah. So one of the questions I asked myself was, what did success mean to me? Because for so long, I had this narrow definition that I had to do certain jobs in order to make my family proud and my parents happy.
And that's just because of the stigma of
exactly. That's all that conditioning that we've had growing up in society. So I asked myself, what did success mean to me and what sort of impact did I want to have in the world? And going back to what we were saying just now about everyone interpreting it differently, I had to understand, for me personally, what did success mean to me? And I think it's a question not many of us have really answered. We know what society expects success to look like, but what is success for us? So that could be just being a good parent. It could be running a successful business. It could be being in charge of a team. whatever it is. But until we have clarity on what that is, we have no direction.
Do you have any actual tips for people on how to find what that clarity is? How to find what, because I think that's the hardest thing. Like people, they don't know. They don't actually know what their morals are. They don't know what they love.
The hardest thing, or even sometimes you could say is quite a sad thing. I find that the more and more I love doing these podcasts for multiple reasons. We get to talk to people and explore things. But I find that we talk to people that understand who they are and what they like and what they enjoy. Whereas we talk to a lot of people sometimes, and the really hard thing is I feel like they don't know who they are.
Yeah.
I'm not on about young, or they may be young, they may be old, but usually older people, they've never found who they are and what makes them tick.
Morals have been conflicted.
And I find like people always have multiple reasons for that or excuses that they've made up themselves. Like sometimes life, it takes over. But I find it quite sad. I'm like, well, at what point are you going to take that step? We have one life. Like we need to make the most of it. Do you find that people ask you these sorts of questions? You have the book, you have your personal experiences, like you spoke about kind of sudden loss, which was kind of something that I found quite interesting, that these things that are unexpected, they hit you sideswipe. You can't prepare for it. But when it's like a lifetime of being like 20, 30 years, and you still feel like you haven't found yourself, like how do you deal with people asking these sorts of questions?
Well, the first place I start is I share that I can relate to that. When I was in finance, that is all I knew. I spent most of my days working in a corporate office. After work, I would go drinking with people in finance. On the weekends, I would be socializing with people in finance. So that was the world I knew.
Were you drinking because you weren't happy?
There was an element of that. So I was drinking because I was a bit directionless, but also that was the thing to do. People would go after work to the pub or to a bar. You see it, and you want to be part of the crowd, right?
You want to do the high fives.
Yeah, exactly.
Be part of the team spirit.
Be part of the team there.
Play that pool game at the
pub. So I did it for that, but I knew it was only at the surface. As in deep down, this was not fulfilling. And the thing is, like many people, I didn't know what it is I wanted to do because I had no knowledge of a world outside of finance. And so when I share...
finance has always been your life from young...
From graduation, And I think it's more because when I grew up as a teenager and I was starting to think about career choices, whether it was my careers advisor, my parents, or my peer group, they were all saying, "Oh, you'll be successful when you become a banker, a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant." These very traditional roles that had a good reputation, paid decent, and were respected by your peers in society.
And so in a box, that does.
It puts you in a box, and I fell into banking because I watched films like Boiler Room and Wall Street, and that kind of seduced me to going that direction. And so for me, I didn't know anything outside of that industry. So when people ask me, I'm a bit lost, I don't really know what I want to do. What I say to them is nobody does. You don't wake up one morning and go, Eureka, I know exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life. If you're in a Hollywood film,
there's multiple crossroads that get you to that point, aren't there? And I think it's identifying, for me, it's always like, there's always a crossroad. It's identifying which route and for what reason you take. Because within our careers, it's up, down, it's left, right. You never know what's happening. But I think it's important to always be true to yourself and who you are and what you stand for. Even when people think you're a bit crazy, you're like, no, there's a reason behind it. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to stick to one thing because I've been told, or I have to, or that's the thing that should be. Well, why is it? Why can't it? Like everything's possible if you put your brain to it. You can do it.
Absolutely. And I think that's why certain things have to change first before people can transform their lives. So for me, the very first step I tell someone is look at your environment. Look at your environment. It's the very first step.
So by that, you mean the people around you, the job you do, where you live.
So everything. So it could be the books you read, the people you spend time with, the podcasts you listen to, what you watch, who you follow on social media, your physical spaces and your digital spaces. These all influence your thinking. And so to sum it up, I often tell people that the fastest way to make progress in your life is to design an environment around you that makes it impossible not to succeed. So how does one go about that? One of the first questions people ask me is like, Simon, you get to hang around with these people and you get to hang around with these mentors. Of course, you're going to have a great environment. And I say to them, well, you can do so as well. Maybe your mentors start off being books.
You didn't always hang around with them people.
When I first started, my mentors were books.
Because we spoke at CarFest. I liked, ironically, your energy. You came to us, we spoke.
Got a good heart.
But the conversation was open.
Yeah.
And it was, you didn't have a direction, I didn't have a direction, but there was an open conversation.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, okay, we're going to do a podcast straight away afterwards. So this was ages ago. And it's like, do you have the opportunity? Are you here?
Yeah.
What, are you traveling? Continue to follow and read more into you. But these things don't happen if you don't put yourselves in them situations in the first time.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's hard.
Yeah.
But taking the first step means that you can take the second and the third. You don't get to fifth, sixth until you take first.
And this is the fact of life, is none of us are given a map up front. And okay, here's where you are now. Here's where you want to get to. Here's the path you have to take. We're not shown it. What we have to do is take action. And the more action we take, the more the map that starts to unravel. And then we get to see what the next step is, the next step is, and the next step is. And the environment helps with that, because when you start to build an environment around you that is immersing you in inspiration, what happens is taking action becomes easier, because the books you read, the podcasts you watch or listen to, that is showing you what is possible. It's breaking your ceiling of possibility and saying, actually, you can do so much more. The habits you desire to embrace, it is the people you are spending time with. It is their minimum. It is what they do at a minimum. And so for me, one of the first experiences of witnessing how powerful an environment can be was when I went to a friend's party. So it was a friend's birthday party in West London. And I met this mutual friend of ours. And he said to me, Simon, do you want to come along to a mastermind group? It'll be with fellow entrepreneurs who are looking to build and scale their business. And I'd only ever come across the idea of a mastermind group in Napoleon Hill's classic book, Think and Grow Rich. And so I said, yeah, I'm in, without realizing what I was signing myself up for. Because at this point I was still in a full-time job and I was just getting my ideas off the ground through a side hustle. So I came along to this meeting. It wasn't held in, I thought it was going to be held in a place like Costa Coffee or Starbucks, but it was held at the Ritz. It's a very sort of fancy place for a mastermind group.
Very fancy place, I will tell you that right now.
So I go along to this mastermind group. Definitely not a Costa. And there's 10 of us in a circle. And so the facilitator goes, we're going to go around, each of you introduce yourself, and then we're going to kick off today's session. And the first person introduces himself by going, I'm Patrick. I co-founded a company called HelloFresh. I quit my job as a lawyer.
Oh, did you get into this? So I want this circle. Wow.
And I'm thinking, they're like, how am I going to introduce myself? You know, my hands start to feel sweaty. I'm like, my head's whirring, like, I'm still in the job. I haven't started the business yet. And then the next person introduces himself, says, hey, I'm Dominic. I just got back from Los Angeles, picking up an award for a book I released last year. And I'm now really starting to think, why was I invited? I'm getting full-on imposter syndrome. And fortunately, in that session, I didn't have to introduce myself because it stopped 3 people before me. But I got the chance to think about it more, and the next week I had to introduce myself. But what it showed me in that very first session was that very often we have to put ourselves into situations where we feel like the dumbest person in the room, because that's where growth happens. Because I felt like I was the dumbest person in that room, I became a sponge. I was absorbing the energy, I was absorbing the insights, I was absorbing the wisdom. And I came out of that with so many ideas, I couldn't sleep until 2 or 3 in the morning that night.
I have a question. When the people introduce themselves, and maybe obviously you say like HelloFresh or he's picked an award up in LA, did they, because I've been in some of these things and I always find it more intriguing. Yes, if they've launched a business or they're founder. On one side, I respect that and I want to understand how they've scaled and grown and marketed and all of that side. But on the other side, I want to know what makes them tick. Like, are they like, hi, I love going out, I'm a social person, or I'm someone who stays home, or like, I always find that side more intriguing. And sometimes I feel like we're so quick to saying, hi, I'm a dancer and I do a podcast and I'm launching a financial investment app. Well, you don't actually say anything about you as a person.
Yeah, I totally agree.
A sad thing,
because you know, one of the things I talk a lot about when I work with leaders and entrepreneurs is communication. Communication is one of the most important business skills that we can develop. And one of the first questions you will get asked when you meet someone for the first time or you go to a networking event is, what do you do? And as you said, we jump into using titles.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a dancer, I'm a chef, I'm an entrepreneur, which doesn't really tell you much.
Doesn't tell you actually about that person.
Yeah, it doesn't tell you anything about that person.
Because if I'm going to go into business with somebody like our friend Wes, like
you want to know the morals.
I want to know what they stand for. Are they a family person? What drives them? What are their friendship groups around them? Like, do they want everybody to succeed at the same time, or are they somebody who's going to just take? Whereas that's so much more important, because that's the decision for me saying, yes, I go into business, or no, I don't. And it's literally as easy as that.
Yeah, and this is why my challenge to people when they do get asked that question is to respond with a trailer. So this is what I mean. So when you go to the cinema, before the feature film comes on, you have about 5 or 6 trailers, maybe a minute or minute and a half long. Now, if the trailer has done its job, you're going to say to your friend or your partner, let's watch that film when it comes out.
Oh, yeah.
I want to come back and watch it when it's out. Now, in the business world, in the real world, that full film is your product or your service or your idea.
Yeah.
So when you drop a trailer, you're getting people to respond with words such as, tell me more. How does that work?
Yeah.
How do I get involved?
Yeah.
And this is going back to what we said earlier about emotion. Emotion is energy in motion. So when you're starting to talk about your origin story, you're sharing your values, then what happens is they get curious. I'll give an example just to illustrate how this works. So let's take a boring industry like paper. So if you were to say to me, Simon, what is your business? What do you do? In the normal way, I might say, well, guys, I produce nice paper, handcrafted by a team up north in England. 7 of us are contributing to this project, cheaper than our competitors. You interested in buying some or looking at it? Not very compelling. Again, it's a very superficial title.
Slightly
level.
plain.
It's a very descriptive, but not emotion involved in that presentation.
Yeah.
But imagine now I emotionally charge it. I tell a bit of a story, and now I communicate it differently. So I might say something like this. Hey guys, one of the things I believe in is the spreading of great ideas. And the more we can spread great ideas in the world, the faster it becomes to change our world for the better. One of the mediums for doing so is through the written word. And this is where we come in. We design beautiful handcrafted paper for big ideas. Are you interested in learning how we do it?
You gave them a reason, you gave them a solution.
There you go. But also it creates a visual. It creates emotion, it creates connection. And this is why stories are so powerful.
Like, to think the one thing that survived over time, endless stories are always from before there was pen and paper. Stories are the one thing that
it's the only way of communication in reality.
It works.
Words are
we
stories.
know it because, like, as we have evolved, stories have always continued to grow with us.
Yeah.
Well, it literally is. All our words are stories.
I mean, stories are so powerful because stories are packed with emotion. When I educate people on how to communicate better, whether it's through their public speaking, whether it's through social media, whether it's through marketing, what we want to do is think of the story and the message. Because if you only focus on the message without the story, there's no connection. There's no engagement with an audience. But with a story and the message, the story connects emotionally. The message gives them a call to action. So once they're emotionally charged, you've shown them the next step. And this is why some of my favorite ads are the ones put out by GoPro. Because if you ever look at a GoPro ad, first of all, super smart. The budget they have for it is minimal because it's all user-generated content. So they take all of the user-generated content, they kind of mash it up into an ad. You don't see the product anyway. You just see the result of using the product. And by the end of it, you feel like you want to go on an adventure. You feel like, I need to get a GoPro and
very similar to
go
Red
on an
Bull
adventure.
as well. They never actually promote the drink. It's the action sports behind it all. It's the racing. It's the extreme sports. It's the
story. They're clear on the story they want to share. And this is where it comes back to us. What is your origin story? And what is the story you are writing now? Because when you're clear on the story you're writing now and you express it with passion and energy, people want to be part of it. People want to join you on that journey.
Just before we go anywhere, thank you very much for listening to Freedom Impact Trust. We love your feedback, so please do leave a review because it helps others find us, doesn't it, Curtis?
Yes, it does. Comment, subscribe, like, share it to a friend. Let everybody in the world know that this is the podcast that you're enjoying, and let us know what you loved about it. We enjoy talking to you guys. We enjoy having fun, and we can't wait to see you and hear you on the next episode.
Plus, we want to thank our sponsor, FINT, the financial investment app, making investing easy from as little as £50 a month. You guys are awesome. We love you. We're part of you.
don't forget, it's all through 3 portfolios, AJ. Nice and simple.
I know. Have a great day.
See you later, guys.